The second episode of Foundation Season 3 has just been released, and after being introduced to the Mule in the previous episode and Gaal awaking from cryosleep right at the end of episode 1, this episode allowed us to see the past 152 years from Gaal and Hari Seldon's perspective when they were looking to train the Mentalics for the impending battle against the Mule. Within episode 2, we were introduced to Hobermallow's descendant, who is the complete opposite to him. We saw the threatening nature that the Mule has and the desire that he has to be loved by those on Kalgan, but also the rest of the galaxy. And also how the eternal darkness that's on the horizon could have been triggered by the Mule taking that first planet. So with that, let's dive into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is Foundation Season 3, Episode 2, Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Gaal's 152 years in cryosleep. The opening 15 minutes of this episode was the story of what Gaal and Hari Seldon had been up to for the past 152 years. The episode opened up with Thalis, who was the first speaker, and the other Mentalics waking the both of them from cryosleep, which was always part of the plan following Telem being defeated at the end of Season 2. The plan was for a few weeks of the year, the both of them would spend time with the Mentalics and they'd teach them all about psychohistory and enable them to hone and perfect their abilities, because Gaal knew that the fight was on the horizon with the Mule and the Mentalics needed to be at full strength if they'd stand a chance. This was something that happened from the off, and we saw that during this time, Gaal prevented the act of bowing, which removed the religious era that the Mentalics were in, which is why we saw the mayor mention that the religious era passed in episode 1. So it was still the case 150 years later. After they awoke from cryosleep a couple of times, they realized that even with the few weeks that they were coming and going and spending with the Mentalics, it wasn't enough to be able to teach them everything that they needed to know. Time was the only thing that was getting away from them, and they couldn't stop. This is why Seldon offered to not go back into cryosleep, so that he could ensure that the chain of events happen as they were predicted, and that Gaal's fight with the Mule was destined to go ahead. There was still a half century until the Mule's arrival by that point, so Gaal went back in there, and then when she awoke, Ignus was completely different. She'd been under there for a long time. This was 4 years before the present day, which was episode 1. Thalis had passed away, and Prem Palva was the new first speaker. The Mentalics had spread out, looking to spread the message of the Foundation and to recruit other Mentalics so that they'd be able to participate in the fight when it arrived. By this time, Hari Seldon was on his deathbed, and he was a frail old man, telling Gaal that the journey ahead was hers alone to take, because he knew that the Mule had arrived and he was going to be looking for the second Foundation. Seldon said goodbye to her, and it was in this scene where we saw him walk through this portal that took him to Una's world, the place where he'd accepted fate and knew that he was going to meet his end. It was when Gaal awoke from cryosleep 4 years later, where we saw that the third crisis was going ahead as planned, but this impending darkness that was looking like it was looming in the distance that the Prime Radiant was showing them was actually triggered by the Mule's arrival. The Mule taking Kalgan was what triggered this turn of events, and judging by what we saw at the end of the episode with Brother Dusk revealing the Novacula, I'm guessing it's going to have something to do with that. The power of death was placed in Dusk's hands, and we saw a planet get utterly obliterated in a matter of seconds. So it feels like whilst the Mule taking Kalgan is what triggered the series of events, it will be Dusk's weapon that finishes them and brings about the ash in the mouth for all of them. I think there's something symbolic about Dusk having all of that blood on him that they spilled. It makes me feel like all of that blood and death that'll be caused is going to be on his shoulders. Right at the end of the episode, what was particularly interesting was that it seemed as though Brother Dawn had been speaking with Gaal in secret, as there was a device that was hidden, and it seems like they're actually going to be working together and looking to solve the end of civilization as they know it. They have a common enemy now, which is the Mule. Gaal was always destined to fight the Mule, but seeing as though he was the trigger point for the eternal darkness when he took Kalgan, Brother Dawn now has a reason to get involved in the fight too. The Mule's wrath. Now, I thought the Mule was freaking dangerous in the first episode, but the entire time we were watching the Mule in this episode, it was just filled with passive aggression and empty threats. But it just worked so perfectly in getting across how dangerous he was, because there wasn't a moment where I didn't think that he was going to get this girl to use the gun. After all, she was a descendant of Archduke Balerion and a potential threat in the future, so I can understand why he'd want her to do that. First off, the Mule and his henchmen looked like a force to be reckoned with when they entered the hall. I like the fact how there wasn't an entire army that was alongside him. It was just a select group of these giant men that were menacing to look at. It showed that he didn't need a large army. All of the work that the Mule could do and the damage that he could inflict was done within his mind. But then, I also love the fact that within this scene, he didn't use those powers of coercion to full effect. He simply used Scarlet as his test subject and as part of a demonstration where he showed all of Balerian's previous loyal fighters that, if he wanted to, at any moment, he could make them do something that they didn't want to do, no matter how much they didn't want to do it. He wants true loyalty, not to just force people to be loyal. Hearing Scarlet say how her father always told her to never touch the weapon and to never point it at herself or anybody else, but by the end of the scene, having her pull the trigger with a smile on her face, it just showed that full control that he had and that he could paralyze somebody's mind. Even calling her bread roll in the calm, soft demeanor that he was utilizing, it was just haunting and it showed that he was full of games. The Mule standing under the banner, which had Balerian on as he was flexing the power that he had, showed that he was now fully in control and that Kalgan was his for the taking and that he got the people on his side. There was one line of dialogue in particular that stuck out to me that the Mule just kept on repeating. He kept saying, "You will all come to love me," and by the end of the scene, he expanded on it and said, "You will all come to love me," and in short order, the rest of the galaxy will as well. The Mule was actually disliked on his home planet within the novels, and he was considered to be a freak by those that were there. This was due to his appearance, which doesn't seem to be that out of the ordinary in the show, but that was what originally gave him that deep-rooted resentment for the galaxy. Plus, as well as that, he was in prison too, because he was using his powers on people on the planet, but he managed to escape. I'd have to imagine that he did suffer some kind of abuse or harsh treatment if he's going around looking for approval and love from others. So it'll be interesting to see where his true sense of hatred comes from, or if he just wants total control. Brother Dusk's Desperation. The dynamic on Cleon is quite literally all over the place. We've got Brother Dawn preparing to be robed as Day. Brother Day just off chilling, gambling away family heirlooms and accepting the fact that his fate is as doomed as everybody else's. But the one that I'm finding the most interesting and also the most dangerous is Brother Dusk. Since the season began, he's been sharing the same thought process as Demerzel. The whole thought of what is my purpose and the fear of the unknown following the darkness being on the horizon and feeling like your existence is just a waste. We did see him actually being afraid of this before the devastation was predicted, as he was watching the previous Dusks being pushed by Demerzel. During this episode, we saw him go to Demerzel and ask if she could delay the disposal of him due to the circumstances, to which she denied. And we also saw him go to Brother Day and ask him to alter the timing of his lifespan, even though it meant that his mind would enter a state of deterioration, showing that he just didn't want to meet the end. However, that was also denied as well. When it came to the ending of his arc in this episode, we saw that he'd been working on a gift that he wanted to give Brother Dawn, something called Novacula, which was the first of its kind. It was essentially a black hole bomb, and it had the capability of firing towards a planet and immersing it into a black hole that couldn't be escaped. Time and space were broken down within it, and it was an instant planet destroyer, as we saw when it was being demonstrated. It was described as death being placed in the hands of its user, and Dawn said that Dusk should only use it in extraordinary circumstances, which were on the horizon, which is obviously all to do with the Mule. Dawn was later fretting about the Mule and how he wanted to be prepared for him, and Dusk teased him and said, "Oh, you'll be prepared, I'm sure of it." So I'm definitely starting to think that it's going to be Dawn that potentially brings about the end due to the power of the weapon that's going to be in his hands, and whilst it was triggered by the Mule, Dusk showing him that weapon could be the breaker of the timeline in the Prime Radiant. My review of the episode. I thought this was a really strong episode of Foundation, considering we had nothing of the Mentalics, Gaal and Hari Seldon in the previous episode. Having them appear in this one was not only crucial, but by allowing us to see the state of mind that Gaal was in during the present day and how she got to the position that she was in, it was handled and executed really well. My favourite scene has to be the one with the Mule in it. He came across in a menacing way that was just completely different to how he was in episode 1. The terror and fear that he was inflicting into Balerian's previous officers without even touching them. The mind games without even using his powers. It was just pure evil. He seemed to be enjoying it too, which made him seem even more crazy. I also thought the score that was underpinning this scene was one that encapsulated dread, terror, and it felt like it was really leaning into that devastation that he wanted to cause. In terms of the performances, all of the brothers have been doing phenomenal jobs. Brother Day being so chilled when in the past he's been a bit of a paranoid mess is a side to him that I never realised that I needed to see. Contrast that with the fact that Dawn is just so desperate to live and has been working on a weapon that is an instant planet destroyer and is taking everything so seriously. It just contrasted so well, and we're seeing the brothers in a way that we've never seen them before. I thought the introduction of the most recent descendant of Hoba Mallow was an interesting inclusion. Torin Mallow seems to be the complete opposite to what Hoba was, and with him being invited to the Mule's party, with Pritch also being in attendance, I feel like it could all potentially kick off, and Pritch will see just how much of a mutant the Mule is when he comes face to face with him, and that he's not just the pirate that others believed him to be. One thing that I'll praise this show on is that they're able to seamlessly move through planets, space and time so well, and you never truly find yourself getting lost. Where I'd say there have been shows in the past that have had that happen, and it just makes me lose interest. The previous episode had a 152-year time jump from the season 2 finale, and then went back 151 years during the beginning of this episode, and then moved forward to the present day, so I do commend the show for doing that. Another thing that I also love about it are the visual effects. They're so immersive, glossy, and just gorgeous to look at. It's probably one of Apple's best looking TV series in that it just quite literally shines. Even though we've only had 2 episodes of season 3 so far, we're off to a really strong start, and I can't wait to see where we're going to go from here. So, there you have it. Foundation Season 3 Episode 2 Ending Explained.